Thanks.
Oh, you will. I don't know how people intro videos. Alrighty. We're back once again for the third year in a row. The yearly tier list of all the games I played. I decided, because I was thinking about the rulings of it, that it should probably fall under calendar years that I do this. So I'm including anything I played from January of 2024 to the cutoff date was basically today, which is December 23rd, because I haven't started any new games and I don't know, I don't think anything's gonna happen in the next week that causes me to go, oh, I need to add a game to this list, which I guess I should also preface that this list is a little beefy this year. The total count here is 93 titles. Like last year also, I included some games I played off stream that I considered important enough to consider in my gaming year, because I think it's always worth it to talk about every game I play, at least the big ones. There are some that I didn't include that I was thinking about and then said, no, I didn't really play them enough to be like, and they weren't a big enough thing to consider for this point. Some of these though are repeat customers from last year, and I was kind of wondering if they would move positions between years depending on, you know, like how they stack up. Now the criteria of this tier list is relatively simple. It's mainly based on how much would I recommend the game to someone else and how good the game is in the overall sense. I'll talk more about each game in the overall sense. I'm also want to try and add the criteria of game design, you know, the strength of the game design itself, because I always do like general quality, but I think game design also is important to consider, especially for me, because if a game is really fun but poorly designed, it's kind of like, okay, but why is that and how does that affect its placement? My tiers are organized a bit strangely, because S tier is absolute best, I could recommend this to anybody, and also it's just fantastic game, and A tier is pretty much anybody. Like, I'd have to know the person a little better, or at least know that, okay, this game is generally good enough that I could throw it to anybody and be like, oh yeah, you might like this. B tier is more for people where I can say, okay, this is going to require either a little bit more knowledge and understanding of gaming, or it's going to be something more of like, okay, if you're a genre savvy fan, then maybe. I think C and D is where I get into games that I just don't like, or things that are finicky, but we have a lot to get through. I'm going to just go from top to bottom. It's been a while. I don't do a lot of recorded videos, do I? I do not record in front of a camera well. I had to turn on some music. It's in the background. I have Traverse Town on loop. But the first one is Anatomy. This is Kitty Horror Shows. I played this one a long while ago this year. I think it was around April or March. I played a bunch of itch.io games with some friends. Like, I streamed it through Discord and stuff. And Anatomy, I think design-wise, it's absolutely terrifying. It's really good. It's not like the scariest game I've ever played, because the thing about it is that it's that feeling of being home alone and not knowing why you're not safe, but you're not safe. It's that feeling of paranoia. It's got an interesting message about houses and places we live. The only thing that's a little weird is that the game constantly closes itself, so when you reload it, it does different things. And that's fun, but it's also like, okay, it is meant to wrench you out, but it can be strange at times. I do like the way that its art style feels. I like the way that the sound design is nail biting. I think I would put Anatomy in A tier. I think it can be the first A tier today. In terms of horror, it's not so intense that you couldn't get through it. I think for somebody who wants to get into horror, this one's really good because it's not high intensity. It's not monsters chasing you. The problem is that there's no monsters chasing you. And that sort of feeling is really good. It's also a short enough experience that somebody could go through it in an evening. It's really good. Another Crab's Treasure. Oh yeah. Another Crab's Treasure's one. Oh boy, thinking about it again. I played this one off stream because I started it. It showed up in Xbox Game Pass and I said, oh, I should try that out. I heard it was really good. And I have such a weird relationship with this game. I played it early in the year and I don't know. It frustrated me. But it frustrated me in places that I didn't quite expect to be frustrated. I think the main character also, it's one of those things where I think there's a particular strength when a main character in a Souls-like, either they have to be really good or just dead silent. Or they're like a flat canvas for you to be in the world. I think the main character you play as, I didn't like him. His motivations kind of suck, and the entire story it's okay. No spoilers, but it's okay. I think the boss fights were where the game was supposed to be its strongest, and some of them did a good job of that, and others less so. I don't think I could be mean enough to put it into C, but it's definitely, if you like Souls-likes and you like 3D platformers. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, it's weird for me to compare, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. It's like that if it had the Souls-like, you know, dodge rolls and equipment mechanics. I don't think it's bad enough to throw it into C because it's not a bad game. There are some technical issues in it that frustrated when I played. Definitely one of those games that feels a lot less cohesive. Sometimes the game would get in its own way when it came to certain story and mechanical elements, and other times it would let me understand what it was trying to do, and those were the fun times. Short Hike was really good. I don't know if it's S tier. It's kind of got that Animal Crossing feel where it's a cozy game. So for those who are looking for the high act, for like, you know, octane action, or looking for something that's going to get the heart racing, I don't think it'll do that. It has some interesting platforming challenges, but I think it's more a cozy game. I do think it can go in A tier though. I think immediate A tier, just because I could recommend it to most anybody. And I do think the open world design of it is really good. And the whole climb up to the top of the mountain is excellent. It's a journey I would recommend anybody. It was a lot of fun when I got around to it. It's one of those wholesome, cozy games that pretty much anybody would have a decent time. Like it's a good afternoon play. Not the most like pulse pounding game, but I think not every game has to be. It actually kind of goes in the opposite direction of Anatomy in terms of it has a feeling to cultivate, but it doesn't want to do so loud and crazy. It's like in Anatomy's case, it's the gentle darkness. In A Short Hike's case, it's like morning sun. It's not meant to be. Okay, this one is Mystery of Atlantis. I think I'd actually put it bottom of A. No, top of B. No, you don't know. That feels wrong. Bottom of A. It's weird. This is one we played on the Nintendo Switch library day. We did the, you know, like a million NES games in a row. And honestly, the platforming design of it's a little silly. It's very strange. I had a lot of fun with it, and it feels so goofy, but it's so fun. I really liked it. I think I have a soft spot for it just because of how goofy the character's run cycle is. It did make me laugh more than a couple times seeing the little run cycle. Simple, fun game, platformer. It was just simple fun. That one, the game design is simple. It's easy. I think the music was surprisingly good. It's one of those ones you could very easily pick up for an hour or so and just try, you know, take some cracks at it, trying to win. Definitely could see somebody getting really into it and trying to speedrun. I think I've been going a little too fast through the games though. Maybe it's just because there's 90. Okay, we have our first S tier. I think Balatra's an easy one. Balatra's an easy one to categorize though. And a lot of that comes down to taking the roguelike idea and putting it in a way that can be handled by anybody. There's no rush to move. That having an impetus to move is good, but Balatro has an impetus to move that isn't timer-based. I think timer-based is great for reflex-focused games, you know, games that are meant to keep you moving and keep you kinetic. But Balatro's is a cerebral roguelike, because trying to do poker hands and figure out how to get a good hand played is the name of the game, but it's not rushing you. But it still has that same addictive one more run kind of gameplay, and that works in its favor. The whole design of it is such a insane, dense mess to get into, and I really like it. It's a fantastic game, and I could recommend it to anybody. Now then. Oh no, I'm about to make some people mad, aren't I? I know I'm putting this in the description. I know I'm going to get somebody to watch this and be like, oh, he's going to put Baldur's Gate 3 in there. Okay, let's see what he's got. Oh, B. Yeah, B. I have to explain myself. This tier list is not a marker of the quality of a game. Baldur's Gate 3 is an excellent game. I do recognize its excellency. I also recognize that for every step it takes in the right direction, it does something in the wrong direction. And there's another game later in this list that is going to go right next to Baldur's Gate, and it's probably going to highlight some interesting points about how I think of Baldur's Gate 3. I played 2 different playthroughs of the game, which I guess would also be like, okay, this is a research take, because I played a single player campaign and I played one with friends. The first act of the game, very well constructed. I think, you know, pretty glitch free. It's a fun game, but I also found part of this is due to the design of Dungeons and Dragons, like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. If I were putting Dungeons and Dragons up here, it'd be in the same spot for the same reasons, where every good design piece of these games that makes understanding it very fun and engaging, like the roleplay potentials and the ability to explore settings and just try things to try and figure things out, much like other immersive sims, turning Dungeons and Dragons into a video game comes with drawbacks inherent. Namely, there is always going to be a limitation to what you can and can't do, and that there are things that are just straight up not programmed. There are sometimes glitches that happen with open world games like this. Namely, in my multiplayer playthrough, I tried to romance Karlach, and yeah, that didn't work out super well. It's also true that rolling dice in D&D is usually a choice. Usually you make a decision, and that's true in Baldur's Gate, is you have to make a decision and roll to try and do something in specific, like a nature check to figure out animals. It sometimes lends to very difficult gameplay if you roll a bunch of attacks to hit somebody and miss everything. And sometimes you undercut the drama of a fight by accidentally, oops, all crits, destroying an enemy that was supposed to be, you know, built up. And that happens in D&D as well. But in D&D, the DM can improvise and kind of put some wind under the moment in both cases. But in a video game, the code is ironclad and the results are static. So that is a very different sort of feeling. I also found that the story kind of feels weird in a lot of places. Just to me, I think some of it's okay, some of it's not. And again, it's one of those where story-wise, it would take steps forward and backward in general because of certain characters, how people act, and also how certain mechanical things would happen. Yeah, and by Act 3, the game was falling apart. I had a few crashes happen at Act 3 that were upsetting. Again, I do see how good it can be, but it does have issues. So yeah, that's Baldur's Gate 3. Arkham Asylum. Oh, do I just shove this in S tier or do I take away my objective bias? And because I am biased on this one. I was able to finish it in 6 hours. I didn't 100% it, but I got, I think like, I'd say 87% or 70%. I think it was 70. It was probably closer to 70. Yeah, I think it'll be like skating the line between S and A because there are things in Arkham Asylum that are a little bit aged weird. I think the Poison Ivy fight and the Joker fight especially, the final fight of the game, it is such a weird fight. It doesn't make sense. It's so goofy. I think even in the moment I said something about how it just doesn't make sense. If 90% of the game is insanely good and then 10% is like, oh, it's just okay, I think that's fine. It's kind of the best Batman has been because he does the investigations, the crime fighting, and puts those two together and actually shows you why the Batman is the Batman. It's still a fantastic game. I'm happy that the Return to Arkham Asylum version is still really good. It's up-resed and looks really good, plays really good. Probably could recommend it to anybody except for like the people who are devoutly against superheroes. For anyone looking for a good video game, it's right there. Okay, this is another one that I played off stream, Buckshot Roulette. I will say, I think this one gets to go in B tier as well. And it's not because of gameplay design, because the design of it is awesome. Because it's in a game of information and your objective is to outfox your opponent and reduce their HP to 0 by shooting them in the face. And it is insanely well designed. I think the art style is also just, it's great. The sound design is hilarious and also really well done. I say hilarious because when you get shot, in most video games, like you play Call of Duty or you play any first-person shooter, you get shot, you hear the bullet, you know, the whole way through. In Buckshot Roulette, you hear the startup. If you're getting shot by the opponent, you hear the startup and then it cuts off. Genius move. It's always jarring. It's also a really fun game to play multiplayer. They added the multiplayer update. It's very fun. I could recommend it to more people, but I think the source material on its own is a little morbid. Definitely one that I would recommend if you have a slightly darker sense of humor. Cave Story. Okay, this one's gonna be tough for me. We played Cave Story for a couple Sundays. I did really like it. I think there were some things about it that aged a little differently, just because it's quite a different game in this era. It was one of the first huge indie games, but I think it's an A tier game. Part of it's just because of high recommendation value. For game designers and for just the casual gamer, it's one of the first indie games that exploded, and also it's really well done as a 2D platformer and an adventure game. I think getting the different endings might be a little tough for some people, but it's the music and sound design, again, another one of those big standout ones. Art style is great. It is a piece of gaming history that I think if you're a game designer going into platforming, it's necessary. I think that's true for, I think A tier up. If you're going into game design, these are games that really should be investigated, and yeah, still fantastic. Clone Drone in the Danger Zone. Oh yeah, this is another one I played off stream. I've been playing it on and off with friends because we do the arena modes, both playing against each other and cooperatively against AI. Actually, a standout game. I don't think it goes above Cave Story, but I think it's an A tier game. It's another one of those 3D games that looks a little strange on the surface, but it has some interesting mechanical depth in terms of trying to figure out how to master combat. The different weapons you have are really fun. You play as robots and you fight other robots. The humor in it is a little bit strange. It's a little quirky, but it's fun. I think this game is real good. I would recommend more people try it out. Fit2 on Clubhouse Games. Okay, this one cheats a little bit because it's technically a bunch of different board games. I think it could skate bottom of A the entire way through. I think it could just be the baseline of A because it is basically just a collection of board games, and some of them are a little weird. I think the card games and the like air hockey stuff is like, okay, this is a little bit weird, but a good responsive collection of games. Really chill and cozy. The design of those games is something that is worth study for anybody, and also it's just really nice to get into board games. So yeah, good. Good stuff. Content warning. Okay, this one's weird because I collaborated with some other streamers on this one, and I think it's interesting because the game kind of sat on shaky ground for me for a good long while, mainly just because the main impetus of the game is that you record footage in this scary place and bring it back up, and I couldn't view the footage until they updated the game after a certain point. So there were some inherent issues when I played it then. They did fix that since then, thank goodness, but the game itself has some weird coding quirks that are still a little strange. I think it'll be below, I think it'll be in B tier though. It's not the scariest game ever. Like, it's not meant to be. It can be scary, it has its moments, but it's certainly not the most impressive of the games that are, you know, meant to be multiplayer with the proximity speech and the specific design to be multiplayer and streamed. It's not too bad though. I think I could recommend it to those who are looking for a fun weekend thing to do. It's not like a bad game at all, but just there are iterations they could do in terms of area and monster design that could help shore up some of the weaknesses in their coding and priorities. Let's see. Okay, so the Crash Bandicoot games, I played these on the Insane trilogy. I think Crash 1 and 2 can go right next to each other. I think they're A tier. No, I'd put 2 above 1. I think that's fair. It's like, it could be a toss-up though. I think 3 can go here as well. I think all 3 can go together. The Crash Bandicoot games are fascinating. Overall, a really solid showing of 3D platforming. There were some glitches in the Insane trilogy and little graphical oopsies, I would call them. And there's some other little things in the first game that really suffer. But overall, the 3 games are really good at giving the player room to learn how to play the game and to learn platforming. And they were sort of pioneering some stuff in 3D platforming that was necessary growth for other games to succeed and figure out where they were going to go when it came to 3D. I think the games still stand really strong. I think all 3 of them are really good. Again, I think it could very easily be a toss-up in what order I put them in. I think 2, 1, 3 is my order, mainly just because I think 3 was a little bit more finicky when it came to adding feature creep, which is going to be a later trend with some of these games, is that feature creep ended up becoming a genuine concern with some games. There's another game I'm looking at right now that suffers from this a lot, where adding too many different control schemes can cause issues. I think 1 and 2, fantastic. 3, a little less fantastic, but still really good. I do recommend to play. Okay, Devil World actually gets to go above. I think Devil World gets to go, you know, I'm going to put it up here. I had a ton of fun with that one. I think it's also just the joke in my head of Tamagon, a little dragon dude, like having the voice of Titus from Space Marines 2. Such a silly little game, but it's so fun. And I like the dungeon crawling aspect combined with the arcade style of like Pac-Man in this constantly shifting maze where you have to collect these little dot things and shoot little monsters. It's such a simple little game. It's for the NES, and the game design, the actual rules of the game are really well understood. I was able to pick it up and start playing right away. I didn't have to have a big explanation, but even for beginner gamers, if they understand the basic rules and understand what they're meant to do, I don't think it'd be that hard to figure out. Overall, it's very cutesy. I think it's very funny as a historical piece too, because the religious imagery in there is actually kind of interesting, because I don't really see many games with crosses in them anymore that aren't horror games trying to be all spooky with their occult stuff. But this game actually has like, your dragon is fighting in the name of the Lord, which is it's kind of funny. I don't know, it's really good. I like that one. Donkey Kong Country. Oh, ooh, do I? Yeah, you know what? I know where it goes. It goes to S tier. Even if I'm not good at the game, I did beat the game. It's real good. The platforming in Donkey Kong Country, I would say, is timeless. I don't think that it aged in a way that hurt it. I think some things about it are a little strange. It's definitely a difficult game, but it's a really well designed one. Really good game. I'm happy I played that one this year. I'm happy I beat it too. Let's see, Dr. Mario. Oh yeah, we played this one again on the NES day. I think it goes in A tier. A tier's finally beefing out a little. I think Dr. Mario's fantastic. Still great puzzle design. Much like Tetris, it's a puzzle game that's meant to be focused on the organization of space and how you solve problems through spatial reorganization. I think it's really good. I think a lot of the arcade style games, much like roguelikes, the fun is getting better at something and developing a skill rather than explicitly trying to beat the game. I think it's a lot of fun to just, you know, go for high scores and develop your ability to play something. Dragon Ball Sparking, okay, Sparking Zero is going to be an absolute mess for me. I already know this because there's the very subjective bias in my head of overall, I love this game, but also thinking, okay, how much could I recommend it to someone else? And how well is it designed? And how good is the game overall? Oh man, because on on the one hand, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a pretty well-designed fighting game. Really well-designed. It is just like 100% fighting game. So there's not like a ton of other modes. And there's, you know, there's story modes. This is a tough one. I think it goes top of B. And this is another one I have to stop and explain. Game is fantastic. However, it is my top recommendation for Dragon Ball fans. And for, you know, generally, I think fans of anime could get into it. I don't know who else would want this. Like, as a fighting game fan, you're gonna get a fair amount out of it, I think, but it's not more than that. And it's a real big love letter to Dragon Ball fans, but it's really hard for me to recommend it to someone who's unfamiliar with or doesn't really like Dragon Ball, because a lot of it is Dragon Ball story. Again, it's very similar in the sense of to like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, where if you don't know Dragon Ball and it being your first time seeing Dragon Ball, it's an interesting experience to play through because you don't really have context for everything. I think Kakarot does more explaining and just goes through the story entirely, but Sparking Zero is in an interesting spot because it kind of presumes you know. Like, you didn't come to Sparking Zero because you've never played or seen Dragon Ball, and that lends itself to be in a unique space where it's very hard to get into it, like crack into it without that prior knowledge. If you didn't play one of the Budokai Tenkaichi style games, the gameplay can feel a little bit strange to learn at first. Even for me, it's like I played Raging Blast 2 and I still had a little bit of an issue adapting. I got good at it, but later, but it was curious how I had to figure all that out. It's a great game, but if you're hoping for more, then maybe not. It sits in a similar spot in my head as Baldur's Gate 3, where in terms of it's a huge game and it's a fantastically designed game, but there are other things that come into play when it comes to how I, you know, rank them in my brain. Fun game, but yeah, it's tough for me to put it higher because I couldn't recommend it to anybody who plays fighting games because not everyone would want to play the arena style fighter. Okay, Drill Dozer. I feel bad because I had to finish Drill Dozer off stream. I rage quit after a particular boss fight. I think Drill Dozer is exactly what I was talking about with Crash 3, where feature creep really got in the way of some like great execution, where Crash 3 was able to manage it by having a couple levels of some vehicle levels that still played pretty good, just were a little strange. Drill Dozer got in its own way with adding all the different vehicle types, you know, the helicopter, the submarine, and there's a bunch of other weird ones, but it got in the way of a really cool design for the Drill Dozer. The way you play the Drill Dozer is really fun, but there were levels that got in the way of maintaining that and just building on what was already good about the Drill Dozer as a mechanical idea. It uses some really cool stuff, like the ability to change gears and do more powerful drill attacks, and the vehicle itself controls really well. I think the systems that were at play here with the mechanics were really fun, but man, the different vehicle types get so much in the way. I was able to off stream figure out how to use the helicopter in the level that you use the helicopter thing, and that's it. It was really cool, but when I figured it out and I learned how to hover, it kind of just frustrated because it's like, well, why have this weird floaty system when you could have just built on the platforming and the different ideas that you already have introduced. And this game definitely rushed through those. I think that this one gets to go with Another Crab's Treasure. I think I'd put it slightly above just because of the fresh idea of the Drill Dozer is really cool, and I would recommend it to anybody who's into those weirdo platformers, the ones that have those weird mechanics that just kind of do strange things with what they have. I think Drill Dozer's story, I think the main character is really fun. She's adorable, and the relationship she has with her family is really fun. Good game. Execution could have been better. I do hope for another Drill Dozer at some point. Oh god, not again. You know, let me move it first. You know, and yes, we are talking about Shadow of the Erdtree. You know what? You get to go right there. They're at the same level. Yeah, this is another one I have to talk about, huh? I think I talked about Elden Ring in a similar vein, but I think Shadow of the Erdtree, the toughest thing for me is recommendation feels weird because I already am a bit leery of recommending Elden Ring to some players just because you have to be kind of decent at video games to play a Souls-like game. You know, it's like one of those things where you played as a young adult, because Shadow of the Erdtree is fantastic on the level of Souls players. It's fantastic, but I can't recommend Shadow of the Erdtree to everybody, especially those who have never beaten Elden Ring. If you haven't beaten Elden Ring, I don't think Shadow of the Erdtree would be very fun, because Shadow of the Erdtree takes what is good about Elden Ring and what is bad about Elden Ring and doubles down. It amps the challenge, it amps the obfuscation of where you're supposed to go, and also does a fantastic job of presenting boss fights, of presenting enemies, of giving you places to go. It is well designed. It has some really cool stuff, but it still has the issues that I have inherent with Elden Ring. Even more so with this, where the way you get to the DLC is so specific and so far into Elden Ring that to even access the DLC, you have to do so much extra work and a lot of prep to even see that DLC. It also has the issues I still have with Elden Ring that I think the FromSoft games and Souls games in general do struggle with the open world format. To me, I see it and see that there is a problem there, that it is also really, it adds to the fun of trying to figure out where to go. But in this modern age, it can feel strange to throw the open world format in and see how it plays with those mechanics. And the open world format for Shadow of the Erdtree feels weird, because you are going to end up going the right ways if you're really not understanding where to go and how to get there. Some enemies are going to be walls that force you in a direction. And open world games feel strange when they're going to enforce a direction, because then why make them open world in the first place if you're going to enforce a direction anyway? It opens up a lot of questions. Same with Baldur's Gate, where I think there's some great stuff going on, but sometimes it takes steps backwards. Next, Fear. Ooh, that's right. We played this one. It was, I think it was 2 Sundays. I had to do 2 days of it. Fear 1, the original Fear. Played that one on the PS3. I think this one can go, I think, in A. I think Fear 1 gets to go to A just because it is a relic of an older era where having a single player campaign be the main crux of a first person shooter, it's not a dying breed by any standard. I think there are a lot of games that still do this, but to really only be a single player game is really fascinating in this era. At least, you know, in 2024. Back then, this was normal. I think Fear is probably one of the best first-person shooters in general. I don't think that's a hot take. Even with the horror elements being kind of spooky, honestly, the game doesn't struggle with it in ways that other games that combine the two do. Fear 1 really does a good job of just invoking the dread while also giving you some really awesome first-person shooting action. I think the slowdown mechanic is both very funny and also really cool. It is just overall really fantastic game design. The level design is really slick too. They do some great job setting up cover and areas for you to deal with the AI. The AI is also one of the key points. It did a lot of stuff that later games had to build off of in terms of figuring out immersive AI for your enemies in a game. It's just stellar work overall. I could recommend to anybody who's into shooters. I think the horror aspects I have to kind of give a soft warning about, but very good stuff. Moving on. Oh yeah, it's time for me to talk. I'm gonna put it where it is and then explain. Fear and Hunger comes with a freaking warning. I'm gonna slap that on right now. Do not look this game up unless you're ready. Fear and Hunger is an RPG Maker game. It is a role-playing game, but it is also, it's like Berserk if you are the background characters. That is the best description I have heard and used, because man, it is a dark one. I think it's really interesting how good the design is, because it does everything basically wrong. According to conventional game design, having random chance dictate things is a bad idea. That said, look at Baldur's Gate 3. Fantastic design, but also holy crap, it is quite a different game. I don't know if I should put, you know what, I'm gonna put Fear and Hunger below these two, because I think it is, you know what, I'm gonna put it at the bottom for only one specific reason. I'm gonna put it there for a specific reason. Design wise, I don't think people who like Baldur's Gate 3 will like me saying Fear and Hunger is similar, but when you start looking at how often a flip of a coin or a roll of the dice will actually change your fate, kind of important to consider, because random chance is something, and luck is something that permeates both games. Both games showcase a real power in allowing fate and RNG to have an active grip on your game. I think Fear and Hunger's world design is also really cool. I think it's fascinating, and it plays like a roguelike where you have to keep trying over and over to figure out the intricacies of the dungeon, your place in the world, and also just even getting anywhere without dying. Really, really good game. I cannot recommend it for any but the most diehard of like fans, just because, yeah, game's real dark. Oh yeah. A strange one. Okay, next, Fire and Ice, otherwise known as Solomon's Key 2. Okay, this one I'm gonna throw up to S tier. I think, yeah, S tier. I only got to play one world of it because we had to stop for a little bit, but oh my god, it's so good. What the heck? It's a puzzle game where your goal is to create and destroy blocks of ice to put out fires. It's shocking how good the puzzle design is. The storytelling of it is charming. It's amazing how adorable it is. That's a good one. Alrighty, Golden Sun. Oh, I think I need to put it in, I think I'm gonna put it up here in A tier. I think there's There's some interesting stuff to talk about with Golden Sun. In terms of game design, the mechanics of synergy, someone in the comments please correct my pronunciation if there is one. The way that it is designed for both adventuring and combat, synergy is so freaking cool. It sometimes has some weird little things that are a little strange, all things considered. I think some of it works better than others, but it's really freaking good. It's a fantastic RPG, and I think the first one especially, we'll talk about the Lost Stage later, but it's really freaking good, and it does a fantastic job of world building and establishing story. And I think the character arc that is set up, it's not really a character arc, but more the storyline that it's meant to follow, it's so well established in the first 10 minutes of the game. I struggle to think of RPGs that so efficiently get you invested in wanting to solve the world's mysteries like Golden Sun does. I think Golden Sun is fantastic, and I could recommend it to a lot of different people. Golden Sun, fantastic. Oh, Greener Grass Awaits gets to go right next to Anatomy, I think. I think it'll go below though. So it's a golf horror game on itch.io under the name, I think it's the Toem Top. As a genre melder, you know, golf and horror seems a little strange, but the game itself works really freaking well with it. It's a short game if you're playing, you know, at a reasonable pace, but the game itself is just a really fun, complete package. And the way you play golf is all first person, and that mechanical clumsiness comes into play when the horror sets in. It's really strong horror. And there are some accessibility options if some parts become too difficult to win, but it's a really good game, and I think more people should see it. Grim Fandango. This one is going to be tough because I don't know where this is going to go. I played the remastered version of Grim Fandango. It's a really solid point and click adventure game. Oh my god, some of the puzzles make no freaking sense. I think it goes in B, only because of the fact that design wise it's really good. The story really fun to get into. It's simple, it's a simple story, and it follows a movie like arc. The character, I think Manny Calavera is hilarious. I think he's a great character, and I think the writing is, it's excellent. I think especially the end, there's a bit that it makes me laugh every time I look at it. It is insanely hard to play without a guide. But Grim Fandango, some of it is that the logic by which you have to solve certain puzzles is insanely hard to decipher, especially if you're on a timer, like, you know, when you're streaming or playing it, or you know, like playing it in between things. It is very difficult to sort of decipher what the game is asking of you. It is a very stylized game, and some of those style choices also lend itself to being really fun to just, but yeah, it'd be one of those ones I recommend to experienced puzzle players and gamers who are looking for something out there, something different. And I like that the remaster allows you to switch back to the original graphical fidelity of the game. Alrighty, Gris. I think Gris gets to go, I think I'd put it above Fire and Ice though. I think it goes here. Gris is it's a 2D platformer, but it's a fantastically written and penned game. The story it showcases and tells is stellar, and I think the visual language of the game was absolutely phenomenal, and a lot of what it did was just insanely strong on all fronts. Next is Helldivers 2. This is another one I played off stream. I think it can go next to Fear. It navigated some tumultuous waters. It's definitely had a rough time this year, man. I think the cooperative play, the design of the missions, really solid. Guns feel great. It's a great cooperative shooter. I think if you have a good group of friends to play with, it is excellent. Let's see, Hollow Knight. Now this one I have to fight my biases and put it higher than normal because I had some interesting experiences with Hollow Knight. And I think in some ways, some of the games that were the most impactful for me frustrated me in places. I think it goes next to Golden Sun. I think it'll go below because Golden Sun I have a little bit more love for it, but I think Golden Sun I think edges it out in certain ways, but I think Hollow Knight, it's a fantastic game. Art and gameplay feel fantastic. Music is really well done. My issues with Hollow Knight come from story. I think the story leaves me wanting. Standout indie title. I have my issues with it, but most of them come down to how it hides things and how it expects you to find them. Okay, Honkai Star Rail. We streamed it once, played it before we played Phasmophobia, which is also on this list. I played that a little bit on stream, and I also played it off stream pretty regularly. I think it's down here. On the one hand, I think Honkai Star Rail's design as a gacha game is probably the best. I like the RPG combat. I like the way that it's arranged and settled. I think as it's aged this year, I think it's slightly slid backwards. The story has been really cool so far. I think the additions to the story have been really nice. I think some of the other other quality things have started to slip. And I kind of found myself frustrated by that. You know, it started with little things like grammatical errors, lack of voice acting when an update comes out. So it means you have to wait until, if you're playing through it when it comes out, it means that you're having whole cutscenes with dialogue that's just missing. The grammatical errors really get to me. It's like, it bothers me. Also, the problem is that they've been adding more 5 stars than 4 stars, which that is weird. It feels kind of wrong. I think the game's had a bumpy year to me, and it's still good, but I couldn't recommend it to people who are, if you're not into gacha games, I don't think this will fix it. I think the game's story and design and mechanics would be really cool to get into. This year, I couldn't recommend it as much. I think I could have recommended it more last year. Oh, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Okay, yeah, Kirby the Amazing Mirror gets to be, I think it goes up with Gris and Donkey Kong Country. I'd put it slightly above. I'll allow a tiny bit of bias on this one. It's a stellar platformer. Really great for beginners. It has a multiplayer function. I don't know if you can use it though properly with the... I played it on the Switch because it was easy available and I could just get right to it. It does have a lot of cool power-ups. I think the final boss is a lot of fun, and the various boss fights and level design. It is a bit of a maze. It's funny because I think Kirby the Amazing Mirror and Hollow Knight have a lot more in common in terms of level design. When you actually take a look at the full maps, it gets crazy by the end. I think its art style is also just, I love the art style. It's really fun, but I think it goes into S tier, whereas Hollow Knight is in A tier. I think the reason that Kirby gets to go to S tier is approachability. Hollow Knight for most gamers might be too hard. I think it, like for me, it wasn't that bad. It took me only a handful of tries to beat the final boss of the final boss. And boss fights I generally didn't struggle with. And if I struggled with platforming, it was because I had to sit and figure out, okay, how do I get through this section? And that was iteration. With Kirby the Amazing Mirror, it isn't meant to be a hard game, but it's also meant to be something that is approachable by anyone, including those who want to, you know, speed through it and blitz through for the hardest challenges. And I think that it's that ability to be approached and the way that it is friendly to a lot of different types of players that puts it a step above. Let's see. Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. This was one I played off stream because I didn't want to wait for it. I think this one gets to be another, I think this one's another S tier actually. It's a tower defense game, but it's also an action game, and it works with its mechanics and its world building in ways that are really refreshing. I also really like the story it tells is done with no dialogue, and it's simply through context clues that they give you these things. It's actually really freaking well done. And the different unit types are really fun to experiment and mess with. The upgrade system is natural and feels, I think, just fantastic. And it feels like a natural evolution of the tower defense genre while also having really cool action. And the music, I think the music and sound design, again, another one where it's stand out in all fronts. I think the boss fights here, some of them were a little bit shaky, but only one. And it's only because it's kind of a spike in difficulty. Let's see, Lies of P. Lies of P, I would put higher, but I think the only reason I can't recommend it more is just, again, I think because it's a Souls-like. Souls-like games are a little bit harder for me to recommend to everyone, but Lies of P is a fantastically done action game. I played it for a good long while, and the world building is really cool, interesting, it's unique source material with Pinocchio as the idea. And the story it tells of humanity and the ways people will drop their own, they do some really cool stuff with that idea. And also, of course, the action and enemy design just really cool. I think the music is real. I think the music was really strong in some places, and in others it was just kind of, oh, it's there. I think the boss music I usually didn't focus on too much. The records are where it's at. I think Feel is probably one of my favorite game tracks in general. I think it's one of the best songs I've heard in a while. Great game. I could recommend it to most action fans. I think it is a tough game. Worth it though. All right, we do have to specify with Link the Faces of Evil. I played a remastered version that was made for PC, and I played with a Xbox controller. And that asterisk is kind of what's buoying the game, but also the game itself with there's some minor changes to the game design that those versions had. I also played Wand of Gamelon. We'll get back to that. It's worse because I can put it up here with the asterisk that it's the PC version that was remastered. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. That sounds fun. Because the problem is that if you strip out those little tiny things that make the game less fun to play, I think stripping out lives as a resource you have to worry about, and stripping out and taking some little liberties with the game design, and also changing out that god-awful control scheme, it's actually a good game. It's actually not bad. It's not like, granted, it's not like award-winning. I don't think it's a fantastic game in the sense of like, it's not the most insane game ever, but it's a decent platformer and it's pretty fun. And with a responsive control scheme, it's actually pretty fun fun to play. I actually had quite a bit of fun. The story is very stupid. It's silly, and yeah, it lives in the back part of our minds as memes. The game design is pretty solid. It's not bad. It is a little goofy, but what it does egregiously wrong is mostly just on the impetus of it was made for a system that games should not have been made for. But it is worthy of study. I think for both good and bad, it should be studied because it has some interesting stuff. Continuing, we have Mock Rider. I think it goes here, like right here, A tier. Mock Rider is a fascinating one too, because I didn't really realize how many different systems were at play in Mock Rider when I first played it, because it has a system for gear shifting, which I didn't realize. I didn't realize that motorcycles could gear shift. It makes logical sense, but I just didn't know how that worked. As a video game, it has some really technical driving. It's some surprisingly technical work to get the motorcycle moving at high speeds and keep it there. It's surprising how good Mock Rider holds up today. There are some points of it that are a little bit hard to take in visually. I think the snow areas are a little tough to see through. As a racing game, it's really good. I think it's great to study. I think modern game devs could get a fair bit out of understanding what they were doing here. It has some really good stuff, and it being on the NES, again, the Switch library, makes it very accessible. So I think everybody should take a crack at it, see how good it is. I think it lends itself to a great arcade experience, something you could do for a car ride or something. Very good. Mario Kart 8. We streamed it a few times this year, and this is a good reframing for me because it's a game we've played. I think every year I've done at least one stream where I've played Mario Kart with the chat. This year I think we got 2. I think it's still an S tier game. I think it skates the bottom only because I think Mario Kart in general gets to stay. Everybody can play it. Everybody likes it. Its game design is ubiquitous for the arcade kart racer. It's an excellent game. It's always a hit if you bring it to a party. It's very hard to talk more about Mario Kart. It's just an easy S tier. Next one, Marvel Rivals. I think it's gonna go next to Sparking Zero. I think Marvel Rivals it's an excellent team-based, hero-focused shooter. It's really well done. I think it actually suffers from and excels in the same problems that Marvel vs. Capcom 3 has, where some characters feel like game warping if they're in a match, and if they're not there, then it's either players not using them on purpose or not knowing of that game warping idea. And Marvel Rivals suffers from that in the bad way that the game is horribly unbalanced. It's also a good thing that the game is horribly unbalanced because it allows the game to exist in this interesting spot of every character has the potential to be the most devastating addition to a team in the moment. The gameplay is fun, it's responsive. Again, it's a lot of the ticks of it's really, really good. But for those who aren't into multiplayer shooters, it's a hard sell. I can recommend it to those who are looking for something new to try out. It is free, so it's easy to throw to somebody and say, hey, just go try it out. Good stuff. All right, Metroid Fusion. Oh boy, another S tier. You know what? Yeah. It can go way up there. I think Metroid Fusion can go way up there. Was I frustrated at times playing this? Yes. However, really freaking good game. Much like Metroid Dread, I love this game just because of its combinations of fantastic tone and storytelling. The design of the world, of the space station and the world building, the level designs, really, really good. I had issues at times, but it's also because I had to reorient my brain for a game that's 20 years old. And that is another piece of the game design study here that is sometimes tough to wrap my head around, is trying to wrap your head around levels that were designed way before your time and design aspects and principles that are old, but not outdated. And Metroid Fusion does a lot of stuff that I had to really wrap my head around in terms of, okay, how do I solve where to go? How do I understand what I'm doing? I think the game aged in a way that makes it better with time. And I could recommend it to anybody who's looking for a game of this style or just in general. Fantastic game. All right, another Tecmo game, Mighty Bomb Jack. I think Mighty Bomb Jack I'm gonna have to shove way down here and B. It's another one we played on the NES day, and I don't know, something about it just like with Solomon's Key and Fire and Ice did some stuff that were really, really good, but Mighty Bomb Jack, there were some issues with it that I kind of was like, oh, it's okay. I think the system of changing suits is okay. Kind of hard to parse at times. The enemy designs were fun. Some of the design choices were weird. Like not having your acceleration upwards stop when you let go of the button does lend itself to some frustration in trying to controlling Bomb Jack here. And some of the level design, it's really good because it's very vertical and it lets you work with his stupid high jump. I think it would lend itself to being a little difficult to understand. It's of the 3 Tecmo games, I think it was like the weakest in terms of music, but it's still a good game. I think I recommend it for those looking for more platformers to play and understand and kind of work with. Still pretty good. Oh yeah, Monopoly Plus. Oh boy, I see it down there. This is another game where I think we're just gonna shove this. I think bottom of B is where Monopoly belongs, right in the middle. And Monopoly in general, its game design is contested ground for game designers, but it also highlights a lot of what is right and wrong with other games above it, where having chance be such a heavy factor in a game can be really fun, but it can also be deeply dissatisfying if something happens that tarnishes the game, the story that is therein. Because when you play any board game or any game of that style, there are times where having random chance can mean that you can cause something to happen and the story suddenly takes a shift. It takes a turn, a twist. And for some players, that can be really fun. For others, it almost undercuts any amount of choice. I think Baldur's Gate 3 and Fear and Hunger both do this, both to their detriment and their benefit, where having random chance be a narrow miss or a, lucky break can be really satisfying. It also can be horrible if it's for the enemies. Because as a player, it sort of strips out the player's agency and skill becomes less of a factor. But Monopoly is also meant to be a game for children and for families and for people who are generally just trying to have a good time. It's designed to be a roulette table that you play for a couple hours. It's not really meant to be a deep diving, learn the mechanics of it. But yeah, it's okay. Oh man, I'm gonna be so mean about this one. Multiverses was one I played off stream because it got re-released in March and it's going straight to D tier. I can't even be nice about it. Multiverses is awful, man. I don't like that. I feel bad. This is the first time my opinion's gonna definitely get in the way, but floaty controls, netcode is... I think there's a point where making a Smash clone doesn't feel good, and it's when you do it wrong, when the execution misses. And I had to turn voices off after a certain point because listening to the one-liners every time you hit somebody, oh man, it makes you not even want to play some characters. Not my favorite fighting game, not my favorite game overall. I remember I wrote it down on my list. I wrote it down back in March because I said I should probably talk about it at the end of the year. And my feelings of ire towards it are still very strong, even though it's been almost 9 months. All right, and now to rate something a bit higher. Mystery Tower can go right next to the Mighty Bomb Jack. Another one from the NES day where we played a bunch of NES games. Mystery Tower is so freaking weird. I don't know how to best describe it. It's a puzzle game that has mechanics that are not quite understandable, and if you don't have an instruction manual nearby, I imagine this game is even harder to parse because you're staring at stairwells that you can pick up and drop and die. It's very weird. Mechanically, it's a lot harder to understand because its rules are a little bit strange to even figure out in the first place. And it does some weird stuff with its level design. Its puzzles are really fascinating to look at. And I think for those who want a more interesting puzzle game and something that's just way out there, I could recommend it easily. But for most gamers, I think this one's kind of hard to sell to. All right, moving on. Oh, Neon White. Another, I think it goes right up next to Kunitsugami. I love Neon White. That's a great game right there. That's some good stuff. The story is actually extremely fascinating because it is one of those ones that you unpeel as you play through different levels. It's a speedrunning game. It's a 3D platformer where you have cards that you can discard or fire as a gun. It uses and innovates on first-person shooter ideas and elements and the 3D platforming genre in ways that only it could do. And a lot of the unique energy that is within its game design comes from its specific and unique mechanics and the ways that it elevates and evolves them over the course of the game. And by the end of the game, you're doing some absolute nonsense platforming. The boss fights are actually really fun, even if they're the weakest point. Boss fights are the weakest point of the game and they're still really fun. And the whole game is just excellent. I could easily recommend it to anybody. I think it is definitely a little tough to get into if you're a beginner at 3D platforming, especially in first person, but it's worth it. It's worth the trouble. NES Open. I think NES Open gets to go, I'll put it right here. In the modern gaming space, NES Open, hard to get into golf game because it's a lot of, okay, do the mental math, figuring out how to play golf, unlike more modern golfing games. Still really good. For its time too, I think as a golf game, it did some really good stuff. You could learn a lot about how to present things in efficient fashion by looking at NES games and how their art style was derived from necessity. And of course, the simulations they're actually doing all that math behind the cover, and it's really good. Nightshade. I think it'll go below Drill Dozer. Yeah. I could not get very far into it. I didn't have time to. Game is really hard to crack. It's sort of like Grim Fandango, where it's a point-and-click adventure game, and the world building was really cool. I like Sutek as a villain design. He's really awesome. Oh my god, the game is so freaking hard to figure out. But its logic is sound, and a lot of the ideas you have to figure out make sense. It's very grounded in its realism. And the character of Nightshade is also kind of funny because he's a bit of a tryhard, and I find that fun. Next, Oblivion. Okay, Oblivion is interesting because I've been playing a sort of modified version of it where I play with a friend watching and he tells me how to play and what decisions to make, really. But it's mainly just because the two of us are playing it together, and it's been an interesting time to do that. I am playing a character that is doing hand-to-hand combat in a game with a bunch of weapons and crazy armor. I think think Oblivion gets to be, I think it goes next to Fear. I think it's an A tier game. Oblivion is kind of that ideal spot for getting the sword and sorcery fantasy along with the fun of it being a video game while also not compromising with things that are way too out of player control. It's a technical marvel of its time. So yeah, Oxenfree. We played that one a long while ago now. I'm gonna put it in B. It is not because it's a bad game. B tier does not mean bad games. Look at these games. These are all fantastic games. I think Oxenfree is a hard recommend. Some of its story elements are really good. It's a very story-driven game, and the characters therein have to be strong to maintain the player. I liked it in some ways, but in other ways, some of the story felt odd. I feel like it did some really cool and interesting stuff. There were times where I felt like the twists of the story sometimes didn't line up to the expectations I was establishing with the story it was telling. I think some of it's also that some characters feel a lot stronger than others, and it's very distinct how well a character hits. Okay. Oh man. Let's put it where it goes. Here you go, buddy. A lot of S tiers this year. I'm quite pleased with that. Persona 3 Reload. Oh man. The story of Persona 3 is just, it's stellar. It's probably one of the best RPGs I've ever played. I don't know if it would go higher. I think it would go higher than 5 to me. When I played 5 last year, I really loved Persona 5. I think Persona 3 might go slightly above it in my hierarchy of those, only because Persona 5 affected me in a lot of ways that I understood. Persona 3 cut deeper than that and hit places that I wasn't ready to be hit when it came to story and message. I think every character was very well done. Even the ones that are weaker, I thought were at least compelling. I think some of the social links were a little less strong than 5. I think 5 had some ones that I really avoided, but the ones that I didn't like in 3 were far less than the ones I didn't like in 5. The extent of challenge that Persona 3 offers is exceptional. Fantastic game. And now it's time for me to do something that I was ready for. Right next to Shadow of the Erdtree. And this is me being generous with episode I guess. I have to be honest with myself. I love Persona 3. I do not like episode Igus. Not because of Igus, not because of the characters. The story, good. It's good. It's fine. It's actually the fact that the gameplay itself strips out a lot of what made Persona 3 fantastic. The day-to-day routines, that break time between making decisions for combat and for personas and doing the world-saving stuff. All of that downtime, stripping out all of that and bringing it down to just combat, even if the combat's good. The story, to me, Persona 3 Reload story, like it ends, I think, taking out that necessary downtime, those times where you're making decisions that aren't related to just fighting enemies. Sorry, episode Igus, you are at the bottom. Episode Igus, it's not without good things. I think the story it tells of grief and loss is important. Here's I think Phantom Fighter has to go, like, part of me wants to, I'm gonna put it below Drill Dozer, because Phantom Fighter's a game from my childhood that I found a ROM of that I wanted to play, and I decided to play it. I really like it. It is not aged particularly well. It's a 2D platformer from the NES era. Phantom Fighter is an interesting game. It's really fun to play. The music is fun. The sound design is really interesting. It is deeply aged. It definitely aged in ways that, as much as I love the game and its fighting styles and the way that you play and a lot of its other eccentricities, it also aged in ways that I think, even as much as I have personal bias for, are inexcusable. Some of it is a little bit hard to parse nowadays. It is a really fun game. I think if you're playing it strictly for gameplay, you'll have a fun time. It's a bit hard to understand at first, especially for fighting, when you're fighting the phantoms. Hard to recommend for those who aren't into the retro scene, though. Alrighty. Phasmophobia as of December 2024. I think it can go top of B. It pretty handedly holds the spot in B tier. It's definitely made some major strides in the right directions in terms of upgrading and expanding the ideas. It's a fun game. I think a lot of its system development was necessary for other games to catapult forward. I think Content Warning wouldn't exist without Phasmophobia. Lethal Company, I don't think would exist without Phasmophobia. A lot of games that are now these multiplayer streaming staples, really, for collaborations and otherwise, wouldn't exist without Phasmophobia. And Phasmophobia uses horror as its anchor because horror is fun to watch, it's fun to play, and it makes for a great game to play with your friends. I think the expansion of the ghost types and the ways that their behaviors are harder to read for newer players and for players who don't have this litany of knowledge, the encyclopedia, as it were, are going to be at a bit of a disadvantage trying to even figure out what's going on half the time. And I think Phasmophobia having too many ghost types could be an issue sometime, but still fun game, still fun to play with your friends. Okay, Pinball. I think it's interesting because it goes to the bottom of A only on the basis of like like being a history lesson, which seems a little strange, a little silly, but it's really fascinating to looking at simulated pinball as a history piece. It's really fun to dissect and look into, and seeing how it plays. It kind of reminds me of the Space Cadet pinball game on Windows computers. It's interesting seeing how different games have become. All right, let's continue. Colosseum. I will fight bias again, not to just shove it in S tier. I think it goes here. I love Pokemon Colosseum. There are some minor things that I would say hold it back from S tier. Even to me, I have major bias on this one, but Colosseum, fantastic game, excellent stuff. And as a Pokemon game, it's probably one of the best Pokemon games that's like story driven in terms of you have a narrative to follow. The Shadow Pokemon as a gimmick is really fun. The focus on double battles is really refreshing, especially compared to mainline Pokemon games. And the Colosseum battle mode is a fun and unique challenge. But I think the little issues, I think some level design is a little less expansive than other games because it sacrifices breadth for depth with 3D space. I think it does some really good stuff. Fantastic game. I really like it. I'm still love it even decades after I've started playing it. Okay, Pokemon Puzzle League is gonna be weird because I'm shoving it way up here. I think, you know what? No, above Mario Kart. I want that. Pokemon Puzzle League is really freaking good. Played it on the N64 Nintendo Switch thing, and someone redeemed for it. And I just remember when I loaded it up, I was like, okay, what is this game and how does it work? It takes the ideas of stuff like Tetris or Dr. Mario, like we talked about earlier, and it takes those concepts and does some really fun, interesting stuff in a multiplayer format. Like, okay, solve these puzzles, and it's a match 3 game. It continuously keeps you on your toes because you have to keep breaking blocks down to not hit the top of the screen and lose by getting timed out, basically. The mechanical depth of, okay, let's set up puzzle, let's set up combos, let's set up all these different huge swings to try and knock out an opponent. You could do some really cool stuff with it. And the variety of modes and different puzzle orientations, like there's a 3D one where it's this big cylinder you have to go around and solve blocks for. The general flow of the arcade mode is really fun. I genuinely appreciate it for both nostalgia purposes and for gameplay, because the gameplay is, again, rather excellent gameplay for its time and for its style, because I think nowadays match 3 is kind of associated with the norm for puzzles, where it's like for puzzle games only, where it's, oh, match 3, like I think Candy Crush has definitely become the king of it. Puzzle League is absolutely worth the visit. I think many people would really enjoy playing it. Very good. Pokemon Stadium 2. I think I'd put it I'm thinking about where I was when I played it, because I played it in the beginning of January, because I had to round out the game. I think I can go to B. I think especially with how it's available at this point, unless you're able to acquire a physical copy or figure out some connection between a ROM and a ROM and 2 different emulators, you're going to be playing with rentals only. If you're playing through emulation or on the Nintendo Switch store like I did, you're going to be playing with rentals only. And as a game, it takes a lot of Pokemon knowledge to actually beat Pokemon Stadium 2. And remembering how the end of that game went, there was a lot of difficult stuff at the end of Stadium 2. It has a lot of fun mini games. I think the mini game modes are a lot of fun. Those things alone could be enough for somebody to just play like a Mario Party style game day with someone, with your friends and such. But as a game on its own, standing alone with Pokemon, it does have some really good stuff in terms of teaching people how to play Pokemon with the quiz modes in the school. And that is really good for that time. And the battles are really tense. It's really technical, but playing with rentals only means you are going to constantly be on the back foot. And that can be really tough for anybody but experienced players in Pokemon. So I think it has a barrier of skill for entry if you're trying to get in. And some of that is buoyed by having the school to teach you how to play Pokemon, but that school alone won't get you past some of the inherent disadvantages you will have with stats and movesets and Pokemon availability. I did have fun with this though. I did really have a lot of fun doing Stadium 1 and 2 together. Worth it, 100%. Power Stone gets to go to A tier. I played this one on a stream and I spent basically an hour and a half to 2 hours with bad control scheme. And once I fixed it, oh my god, Power Stone's fantastic. Power Stone's a really good fighting game. It has some stuff that aged a little strangely, some story elements that are a little weird. Namely, just I think nationalization stuff is, some of it's a little weird, some of it's a little finicky. Power Stone's fighting, the gameplay mechanics, the 3D arena you fight in, all those things come together to make a really fun fighting game. You can have a very high skill ceiling in that game, and it's also just really fun to figure out because the Power Stones let you do some cool ultimates. Each character feels different. The different movement options for some of them are really fun to mess around with. Overall, it's a really solid, fun fighting game. It's coming out in a collection, like a Capcom fighting game collection in 2025, I believe. There will be that and Power Stone 2 will be coming out again. on like modern systems. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping I can get a hold of that so I can also play Power Stone 2 on the Switch. Princess Peach Showtime. Oh, that's an easy S tier. Easy S tier. I'll put that next to Neon White. Yeah, sure. I played this one near the beginning of the year. Princess Peach Showtime is really fun. It does some really cool stuff with the platforming and doing some fun gimmicks, and the different costume system lends itself to some fun and varied gameplay. And it's funny because it does the thing that I said with some of the games lower in the tiers. I would namely say like Drill Dozer and somewhat Golden Sun, in that with feature creep. But Princess Peach Showtime makes the feature creep its strength and makes a lot of fun and interesting decisions. The different costumes you have and the different gameplay styles you get all pull from a similar core of gameplay, and don't ever lose sight of Princess Peach's own mobility and options, and instead innovate on them. And even the ones that are technically not even close to that, like the baker one, the pastry chef one, and the detective costumes, even though those change the gameplay style entirely, they actually lend themselves really nicely to the gameplay by giving you a break from having to worry about reflexes and timing, and just give you a puzzle to solve and something to have to work on in that way. And the music was phenomenal. It's fun seeing Princess Peach at the helm of a game with absolutely no relation to anything else going on. Just her and her own antagonist. It was actually really fun. I recommend this for anybody who wants to, it's like a family-friendly platformer game, and a lot of people could have a lot of fun with this. Next, Punch-Out. I think Punch-Out's another one where I think time has changed it, but I think it can go next to Pinball. I think Punch-Out's one that if you're going into game design, especially for a fighting game, study Punch-Out. Punch-Out highlights something that, in terms of fighting game design, is super key. You look at Little Mac, his moveset is so simple. You have 2 blocks, you have 2 different punches, like you have your left and right, and then you have high and low, and you've boiled down fighting to the bare minimum. And if you can take every character and apply those bare minimums to them in every way, you have a game that is easy to understand and can be difficult to master, but very good. Very excellent. Oh, hey, we're to 2 games that I need to talk about that are unique. So the first one, that second one we'll get to. The first one is the visual novel, Rainbow Heart of Chroma, which was done by Rainbow Sparkles. I want to be constructive with any critiques I put down. So it's a visual novel, and I had some critiques when I streamed it. I did talk about it when I streamed the demo. I had to play the demo. I think it slots in here. I think some of it comes down to what is possible in the visual novel space, and knowing what is possible and able to be done in the visual novel space, like when we played Ace Attorney last year, and with a lot of other games that have showcased the power of using and subverting the expectations of that genre and doing new things to supplement it. And there were some places I actually said during that stream that there were places to improve and add to. And I think for people who are into the visual novel scene, they'll like, for visual novels in specific, I think people would like Art of Chroma. I think it's a hard sell for those who are looking for visual novels with more experimental additions to the genre. And I hope that the demo, they get to expand upon it and do a lot more with it. It seems like it's going to be a much larger experience by the end. We'll see where it goes. It was a demo, so it's hard to score it in different ways. Oh, hey, there's that one. In that same stream, I loaded up a little bit of it. Might have been me just wanting to talk about it. I think it gets to go kind of cleanly here. Red Genie's my game. I would love to just like crank it, just like shove it in S tier. It's like, no, it's not. I think Red Genie's for those people who like Golden Sun and like other RPGs of the Game Boy era and would really like to play more games of that era. There's another RPG Maker game that feels very similar to it in essence and in art style, which is to say it reused and used assets from RPG Maker's base set and used them in new ways that innovate, that like made it feel new and fresh. I think Red Genie sits nicely next to Doom and Destiny, which is another RPG Maker game on Steam. I think I did a pretty solid job on it. I had to double check. I did put Red Genie in basically the same spot last year too. It's the first game I have released under my own name that I worked on by myself and published by myself, which is a big step. But I think that I have room to grow, and I think that as I get better at my craft, I'll be able to rate my own games higher. I just think Red Genie is fantastic, but I also recognize that, hey, it's also genre specific. It's an RPG it's a turn-based RPG that is very steeped in the genre. I don't think that a beginner RPG player will start here. I think they'll start with like Golden Sun or a Pokemon game. I think Red Genie does what it does, and it does a good job of it. Very good. Okay, this game is gonna go, actually, I think it's gonna go just above that. Another one from the NES era, the SCAT. I'm gonna be honest, the acronym is awful, but I did really like playing this one. It was actually quite good. A little hard to understand. I think the visual nature of it and some of the flashing lights are a little hard to see through, but the gameplay was really responsive, and I liked the strangeness of it. It is very 80s core, very action movie coded game. I think some of it's the name. Man, what is up with you? It's not just the name, but there's other things I'm thinking about with the game. I think I can go down here. Some of it's mostly just because, yeah, some of the visual nature was really hard to read. It kind of slips. The more I think about it, it's like, no, you slip. Ooh, another easy S tier for me. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. This was actually one of the 2 series I started in the beginning of the year before we played Persona 3. There's another one we did. And Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is such a good action game. Great 3D platforming, great action. It is the precursor truly to Assassin's Creed. And in a lot of ways, it really does live up to the heights of 3D action that was prevalent in that era of gaming. The GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era. It does some really cool stuff. The time rewinding mechanic is really fun to mess with, and it's fun to use in every situation. There's a lot of really fun puzzles and different situations you have to solve. I think Yuri Lowenthal kills it in the role too, because he voices the character. There's one challenge at the end of the game that kind of dings the record, where you don't have your time rewind, and it is a very long climb up to the top of a place. It reminds me a little of the Hades section in God of War 1, where you have a just unnecessary spike in difficulty as the final real challenge of the game. But fantastic. Oh, Scanner Somber. Another one I played off stream that I had to talk about because it's kind of lifted into A tier strictly on mechanical weight alone. You have a scanner that you spray little dots with and fill an environment with, and you can only see your environment using this mechanic of putting these little LiDAR dots everywhere. This is the full inspiration of a game called LiDAR.exe. And I'm talking about Scanner Sombra because Scanner Sombra is, in my opinion, better. LiDAR.exe is more about the gimmick. It's more about having the gimmick and then exploring just what it does in a very short time. But Scanner Sombra lets it develop and does more with that idea, including doing some really fascinating stuff, including water and introducing hazards that you have to scan and find and figure out, and the different ways that it expands the story. It actually has a story that's rather interesting because it's very metaphorical. It does lend itself to a very interesting conclusion. I had a lot of fun with it. It was very contemplative. It's not very action heavy, of course not. It's very, cerebral and focused on the exploration of a cave and not necessarily avoiding dangers. It is creepy in places and very perturbing in others in terms of like exploring the pitch black is a little bit strange. Really good stuff. It's on Steam. I recommend it. And I believe it also has a VR mode, which I did not try, but it's there. Very good. I like that. Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. Oh God, I feel like this is going to be one of those ones where someone's going to say, okay, now you're just taking the piss out of the Elden Ring fans and the Baldur's Gate fans. But it's so bad because it's so freaking funny because this game is fun. This game is actually just 100% fantastic. As a platformer, it's really fun. It's weird for me to say that it has some of the ideas of games like Metroid, where it's okay, go find upgrades, go find ways to get through these different puzzles and these different obstacles, because these ideas are just ubiquitous in so many different types of games. And it's so weird to have a 3D platformer about Scooby-Doo being like on parity with games like Hollow Knight and Metroid Fusion, where, oh yeah, it's satisfying to run around in, it's fun, and it's on theme. It seeks to have a theme and a vibe, and then executes it really well. Also, Tim Curry and Don Knotts have guest voice roles in it. It's really weird. It's funny because I've actually beat the game when I played it for a stream, and I've never actually seen the end of the game, and it's very weird that there's a whole section where they just have Don Knotts doing weird improv comedy, and he just leaves. It's very strange. I recommend playing it if you can find a way to play it. Also, having a laugh track on a platformer, I wish more platformers would add laugh tracks. You could have some real mean moments and some real like silly things happen if you added a laugh track. Now then. Ah, yes. Another easy S tier. Right up there with your partner's stream. Okay, Shadow the Hedgehog. I recognize that Shadow the Hedgehog might be getting a little bit of help here. It's gonna get worse. But Shadow the Hedgehog is a really good game. It just feels very strange as a Sonic the Hedgehog game. Platforming, great. The like actual ability to play the game, rather fantastic. The way that it is a Sonic game, okay, that is just weird. But when you look at the gameplay and you look at how it plays and some of the like actual fun of the platforming, it does a lot of what the Crash games do. 2, and then also adds the cognitive dissonance of seeing a hedgehog with a gun. I think time has been good to this game by the fact that the problems it had in terms of tone and story and issues therein actually became benefits to it later, because now we can look back at it and kind of just appreciate it for what sort of strange audacity it has. Okay, I get to go from hedgehogs to wife murder. Great. I think Silent Hill 2, there's only one reason I can't put it higher, and it's specifically because of content therein that is a little too disturbing for anybody to throw to. I think as long as somebody knows that Silent Hill 2 is a horror game and that it's not going to hold back being a horror game, I could recommend it to most anybody who wishes to try a horror game. I played the HD collection version because that's what I have available, and even this supposedly inferior version is a superior horror game in general. Even the weakest versions of Silent Hill 2 are strong horror games. I got frustrated as all heck trying to play it in 2 days in a row, but because there were some parts of the level design that were just, I was like, what am I even looking at here? How do I get out of here? Help. But the thing is also is that I was on a timer. Streaming does also color my experience, where only having so much time to play a game, let alone finish it, does put a lot of the impetus on me to solve things. And Silent Hill 2 is a game that is meant to be like, you're meant to soak in it. You're meant to sit there and enjoy being in the horror, in the spooky zone. And Silent Hill 2 is, I think, an undisputed king of horror. The only reason I can't recommend it more is because some of the content is too much for some to handle. And that's the only thing that stops it from being S tier. Because horror has a barrier of entry in that you have to sign yourself to being scared. You are going to consign yourself to very uncomfortable emotions, not just fear, but disgust, revulsion, anger, and general discomfort. But you have to knowingly consigned to it. I think that can be hard to recommend to some people, because some people aren't able to take on the empathetic response to horror situations. I think this is probably why mouthwashing has been such a controversial game to talk about. I haven't gotten to play it yet, but maybe this next year. But that game, I recognize, has caused a lot of issues for people because their empathetic response is set off in ways that it's different when you talk about other genres. And some of it's also because horror is how we approach topics and ideas that are a lot harder to approach in other genres. So it's the only reason it goes high. It doesn't go higher. But great game, great audio design, music's banging. Skyrim. Yep, here we go. This is where I get spicy. I'm gonna put it under Baldur's Gate 3. I've been playing Skyrim since it came out in 2011 in different versions across different times. I have so much bias for this game. Baldur's Gate 3 does get a pass in places that I don't give Skyrim anymore. And part of that is just because of the fact that Skyrim's game design, weirdly enough, aged in ways that I don't think I like anymore. And some of it comes down to something that Baldur's Gate 3, actually, I will give credit for. Baldur's Gate 3 does have ways for other playstyles to be viable without it feeling like you're handicapping yourself. Because every class in Baldur's Gate 3, every class option in Elden Ring is viable. Skyrim has aged in such a way that we have, a lot of time to understand that if you don't have mods expanding the options of magic, you don't have mods adjusting and expanding the ways that other classes work, other ideas work, the stealth archer just kind of wipes away what is possible. I think Skyrim has aged in a weird way because the immersive sim has broken, and it's because it's been there for so long. It's still an exceptional game. I think technically it has a lot of technical achievements and feats that are really cool to look at, but just like how Baldur's Gate 3 limits the player in ways that are simply because of the restrictions of what is limited by code and voice acting and how much you can fit into a game, and it still has millions of options. There are millions of ways to play through the game. Skyrim lacks that. It knows what it wants to make the player and leaves it at that. And I think compared to Oblivion even, the fact that Skyrim really feels like you are meant to be the Dragonborn, this fated hero, it just doesn't come across as fascinating anymore, that you're meant to be this cool, awesome thing. And then Oblivion, it's just you're a dude with a sword, go figure it out. Or, you're whatever class you want to be. You can make your own class. And Skyrim, I think Skyrim allowing leveling to be affected by all skills breaks the game's balance and ideas. Oblivion actually really worked around that by having major skills be a thing, where only a set number of skills affect your leveling. And that restraint is what makes Oblivion good and Skyrim falter. And this is after decades of being a Skyrim diehard fan. And I'd still put Baldur's Gate 3 above Skyrim in terms of recommendations, because Baldur's Gate 3 does also offers a lot. Elden Ring also, both of them offered in the different directions. Elden Ring in terms of gameplay and also just in general, the challenge. Baldur's Gate 3 has some challenge, but you can circumvent those through roleplay and story choices and being able to use your character's strengths to find new ways to solve problems. It's like Skyrim itself had a very wide casting shadow, a net that it threw out that covered a lot of other games and ideas. But as I've gotten older and as I've seen the game age, it's smaller, it's shrunken in its actual shape and stature. It's still an excellent game. I think if you're playing it for the first time and if you're playing it without mods, there's a lot of room for fun, but it feels like Skyrim has the asterisk of throw mods on top of it. I don't need that for Oblivion. Oblivion I can just play, and I can play that with nothing added, and I can just enjoy it. But Skyrim, it feels like you have to have the asterisk of throw in the Ordinator, the Thunderchild, and the Apocalypse magic mods. You throw those three in, game is suddenly way out there. It's, huge. And throwing in, some other stuff. But with Oblivion, you never hear that conversation that you need to mod it. Just that you can. But Skyrim, it's required. And if the game itself doesn't stand alone, it feels strange. Like even Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, even with my reservations and issues, they stand alone. They don't need the player to do the heavy lifting to stand as great games. Skyrim aged, and now it needs help standing. Man, it feels sad to say that. Damn. Smash Brothers. Yeah, I think it goes below Mario Kart though, but it's still S tier. Not much to say about Smash Brothers. I think I've talked about it every year at least once. Still a fantastic game. All the DLC's out, so it's a complete package. Maybe the Switch 2 will have a version that's just you buy it and has everything on the cartridge, who knows. And still just a standout party game, great fighting game, low barrier to entry, high ceiling to hit, lots of options to play. Yeah, fun overall. There's not much I can add to the conversation on Smash Brothers that isn't just game good. What else can I say? Solomon's Key. Ooh, yay. I think this one can go... I'll put it here. I think it's not like Fire and Ice. I think Solomon's Key is the impetus for Fire and Ice in terms of if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have it. But Solomon's Key does not earn extra bias for simply being the progenitor to an S tier game. And I think Solomon's Key is really, really good. It's fantastic puzzles and platforming. It has some weirdness to its aging. It's still one of my favorite NES games of all time. Even though my childhood favorite is Phantom Fighter, Solomon's Key kind of edged it out in terms of being my favorite NES game of all time. And a lot of that comes down to just being really interesting to rip into and get good at. I just like the game. It does a lot of great stuff. I can easily recommend it. And it's on the Switch library, so that's great. Oh no, time to talk about this one. I think you get to go here. And now we get to talk about something really controversial. Sonic 06 isn't bad. It's just very easy to crack. Its story is weird. It's convoluted. It's Sonic the Hedgehog at the weirdest point possible. It is not a bad game. It's very easy to break if you're looking for issues and constantly pressing on the edges of how the game works, but I don't think the game is awful. I don't think it's as awful as what people say. I definitely think it could have been faster, definitely think it could have been designed with a lot more hindsight and oversight, but it was also being designed on a budget and it was being shoved through it with crunch time, and it had so many things working against it for a anniversary that didn't need to be met that way. But it has had a better legacy, and that's also why Project 06 gets to go right next to Shadow the Hedgehog. It's been updated recently, but Chaos X, I think Project 06 is the ultimate expression of what Sonic 06 could have been in our hearts and minds if given the time and passion and the space to grow. And Project 06, we streamed it. I also got to ask some questions of the developer, not on stream, but in the comments of a video. And he's updated it since. He's done some more stuff with this since. And holy crap, it is insanely good. Excellent fan project, excellent game design. Took the good things of Sonic 06 and revamped them and gave them new life. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. There's only one other game on this list that's going to go over it, and we're going to get there. But absolutely phenomenal work on the developer's side. Highly recommend everybody go check it out. It's excellent stuff. Ooh, now we're on to, now we're on to something interesting. So there's Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, Spyro the Dragon, and Spyro Year of the Dragon. We play these through the Reignited trilogy. Again, pictures from the originals. Man, this is gonna be a weird one for me to put down. But Spyro the Dragon, I think top of A. I'm gonna put all three up and explain. Spyro 2, I think Spyro 2 gets to be bottom of A. Actually, no, he gets to be top of B. Spyro 3, bottom of S. And now, while the Crash Bandicoot games I could very easily link together. I think the Spyro games hit a very different point in my mind. I think the Spyro games feel more varied because Spyro 1, it felt like it was establishing its identity super well. Spyro 1 did a lot to establish what Spyro is and what Spyro does, and the uniqueness of his charm and his mechanical weight in terms of game design and platforming and the way that he is fun to control easily sets Spyro into some really strong territory. And completing Spyro 1 is a very fun venture. It's very easy to understand what you're going into. You know, I think Spyro 3 has to be next to Spyro 1. I think this is better. I'm looking at it now and I'm like, no, it doesn't be an S tier. There's a specific reason for it. I will say, I think Spyro 2 and 3 are not helped by the fact that there is one character, Hunter. Yeah, Hunter. Yeah, Hunter's basically the reason for a good chunk of problems. But in 2 and 3, yeah, Spyro, like some of the side characters kind of hinder the game. I think Spyro the Dragon himself, very fun character. I like the world building that goes around him, and the world that he inhabits is fun. It's very lighthearted, and I appreciate the art design of the Reignited trilogy. The music is standout. I think all 3 games, the music is standout. I think 2 has the weakest, but his 3 has Honey as the Honey Highway one, the Honey Speedway, and that's unfair, honestly. The Speedway tracks in 3 are just insane. I think the Spyro games are really good. Spyro 2 only gets a downgrade because the boss fights they're not my favorite. 3 had some ones that weren't my favorite either, and Spyro 1 only really had the last one where you chase after Nork. I liked Spyro. I think Spyro 1 in general was my favorite. Spyro 3 did a lot of work. Part of it's because Spyro 2 had to take a ton of risks that were really detrimental to the game and its design in terms of how many times it had to like hobble itself to try things. And then Spyro 3 was able to take what Spyro 2 did wrong, iterate on them, and make it a strong case again. Really good stuff, but I think this oscillates a lot. Does oscillate more than Crash does, because Crash is just kind of generally the same quality through all 3 games. I think Spyro has more of that weird energy of each game feels like it goes a little bit towards an extreme more so than Crash did, but the trilogy was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I could recommend it very easily to people who want new platformers to try. I think Spyro 2 though is the one that people will be like, okay, I want to get to 3, and that is fair. Star Soldier. This one I'm gonna put it next to NES Open, but above it. And no, I think this one goes next to Phantom Fighter. Star Soldier's good, but I don't think it's that good. I had a lot of fun with it, and I liked what it was doing and experimenting with in the NES space. It calls itself the standard of vertically scrolling shooters. Really good. Hard to understand and get into right off the bat, but the gameplay is fun. The mechanical hoist of being able to take cover was actually really fun. I thought that was really interesting inclusion in a vertical game like that. I liked it. I had fun with it. Good to study though. Good as if you're getting into the shoot 'em up style games, I recommend studying this one. Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. I think this one's the only C game we have. I would love to shove it at the bottom of B. I don't know if I can do that. Thinking objectively, the problem is I could only recommend it to people who want an easier to access version of the Battlefront games that are okay with having some compromises made to have that experience available on modern hardware. Gameplay wise, I would put it in A because I had fun with it. I did have fun playing it and playing in different modes, you know, playing story mode. I played story mode on stream and multiplayer off stream, but there are a lot of glaring issues and porting problems that it had that I can't ignore just out of nostalgia. And I can't really avoid some of the other issues that Aspyr ported games have. I can't really put it any higher. The Battlefront games hold up well. I think these ports just aren't the strongest of the bunch. All right, Super Mario Brothers. We played this during NES Day. I think it's top of A. I think only because Age has done it a bit of a disservice. Not really. Age did it a bit weird. It's kind of just a piece of history more than anything. Still very fun to play, still very responsive, still the one of the gold standards of older platformers, but it does it a bit of a disservice to talk about it in the modern space, if only because what else can we talk about? What else hasn't been dissected about its game design and its the ways that it's programmed and the ways that it works that isn't everywhere on the internet, right? It's another game like Smash Brothers where it's okay, what do I add to this discussion without just touting off a bunch of points that other people make? But still very good. Excellent game, easy to throw to anybody who wants to play a video game. Mario Sunshine, I think it goes between the 2 Spyro games now. I think only because I've had time to think about it, and I think the strength of Mario Sunshine is being a very strong 3D platformer with a fun gimmick. I think the Spyro games are the same way. We're having just the gimmick of Spyro's abilities is enough to catapult him to being a very strong contender for a platforming mascot. And Mario Sunshine is an excellent game. Not too bad to finish. I think I only played it a little bit this year. I didn't finish it again. Still had a lot of fun with it. I have a lot of great memories with it. Very good stuff. All right, another S tier. I think I need to make a choice here. Does it go above or below Persona 3? No, I think it goes not below, but next to. Tales of the Abyss is probably one of my favorite games I played this year. If I take out titles that I've already finished and played, Tales of the Abyss might be one of my favorites of all time. It's kind of become this year's Stellar Glow, where I picked up a 3DS game. I had to play through the 3DS version as well, and I got to play it alongside another big RPG, and the two came together to form a very strong, cohesive message in terms of the storytelling. Like, the stories of both these games were tightly tied for me, and putting them together in this way, man, it was impactful as all heck. I really love Tales of the Abyss. Fantastic game, fantastic story, gameplay was fun, the music, like every component of the game worked to enhance the experience and bring it to the absolute heights it could be. And I think the main discussions of the story and the plot really fascinating to dive into. It's funny because there's two games here, the Yuri Lowenthal. Three, actually. Three different games, S tiers, Yuri Lowenthal. Clearly, the strategy of success. Have this boy voice characters in your game. All the characters in the game are excellently penned, and you're given time to understand them both on and off the battlefield, and see them in moments of crisis, moments of fun, and moments where they get to come to calm. I love this game. Excellent game. Would recommend to anybody. And now it's time to talk about... Oh, yeah. This is the one that was going to outdo it. Sonic and Shadow Generations. Technically, this is two games, because it's Sonic Generations as ported to this, and Shadow Generations, the game. And Sonic Generations on this one is just Sonic Generations, but with some slight tweaks to its physics, which makes classic Sonic somehow worse. Modern Sonic is just fine. Sonic Generations is unchanged, and it's still a good game. Still, like, I think I put it in A tier. Still an A tier game. Shadow Generations is an S tier game, stapled to an A tier game. And both games are fantastic at what they do. Shadow Generations in particular is probably the best the Sonic franchise has been in years. It's phenomenal gameplay. Frontiers is right behind it, but both showcase the real power that Sonic as a franchise could have, the potential of it. And Shadow Generations is awesome. No further notes. Oh god, we could do... Okay, you know what? This one's getting... I have to be honest with myself. Yeah, I'll put it in B. I'll be nice. The only reason I can put it there is because it's not bad game design. It's just the current state of Pokemon trading card game Pocket. I've been playing it off stream, and it is a tough sell to me. If you're not into card collecting, it won't hit. And if you're looking for a card game to play, it also won't hit. It's good. It's serviceable. If you're playing the single player modes, you'll run out of new challenges to do really quickly. I think this is a game to wait and watch, maybe. It's free, but so you can try it if you want, but it's really hard to say that it's up there because it has some issues, namely the card pool that's available in the game. The rate at which you get to open cards, especially as a reward for playing the game, is shockingly low. I hope it gets better before it gets worse, especially right now with where some games land, and especially where some cards land. Some strategies are just way too dominant. It suffers a lot from the card game problems, but without the benefit of a large card pool. We'll talk about it later. There's a Yu-Gi-Oh down there. Yu-Gi-Oh at least has the benefit of having a large card pool to work from and different formats to jump through. Trading card game Pocket does not have this benefit. It has 300 cards and not enough to work off of to escape those issues. So we'll talk about that more when Yu-Gi-Oh Master comes up. Tetris can go right next to Puzzle League for reasons I've discussed therein. Excellent game design, simple, elegant, fun puzzle game. Easily still one of the best games of all time. The NES version just got put to the Switch, so very great time to try out the original of the originals. Gameplay wise, it does a lot of stuff that is necessary for a fun arcade game to let you just go one more time. Having a fun and addicting gameplay loop and just being a fun game to master. Easy to talk about. Golden Sun: The Lost Age. Yeah, this is where I'm gonna feel a little sad for doing this, but I think it goes next to Ripto's Rage for me. And there is a reason for this. One, it's really difficult to play Golden Sun: The Lost Age if you have not finished Golden Sun 1, mainly because the games were originally meant to be one giant game, but due to technical limitations, they are split apart. While Golden Sun, the first one, has a story that is really strong, The Lost Age makes, I think, a bold choice that is audacious and problematic that you do not play as the characters from the first game. It sort of falls for the same issues that I think it's going to go next to these ones for the same reason that Elden Ring got it. Because you have to have played through all of Golden Sun 1 to get Lost Age and to understand what's going on. Because otherwise you're in the middle of a story. It's 2 of 2, right? The Lost Age has some issues of feature creep, like I talked about with Drill Dozer, where there's a ton of different options for exploration that you have to remember and understand. Golden Sun was able to ride that line pretty well. I think the Lost Age struggles with it at times because there are a lot of different options, and also it does the open world thing of Elden Ring where it kind of becomes a little too large for itself at times. And if I was just trying to find my way to the next thing I want to do in the game, it's a lot of time spent just running from port to port to port, figuring out where to go. Game is still fantastic. I think the game design and the combat is still fun. The animations are still cool. But this is where the game falters, is that where you had a personal connection to the character you named in the first game and the story therein of trying to claim revenge / save the world, the Lost Age doesn't work like that. And I think the lack of a connection to the characters in your party hurts it in the first half of the Lost Age. I'm hoping that by the end of it, maybe next year, I'll be able to talk about it in a more complete fashion. But right now, that's where it sits. The Turing test, I think gets to go, I think goes down here. This is another game that I played on a Sunday. I had a lot of issues figuring out certain puzzles because some mechanics just weren't explained as well as they could have been. And the moral dilemma of the game really falls out. Like the bottom of it kind of falls out the instant you realize that all the people are being just inherently selfish about it. It's supposed to be about, how robots and humans act and think and feel. The moral dilemma just doesn't work. I think the story didn't really land the way it was supposed to, and it wasn't a moral decision for me to choose the ending I did because it wasn't a decision. It was already made by the time the door opened. Gameplay wise, it was okay. I think some of the puzzles are very derivative of Portal rather than being innovations of and evolutions on games like it. It was very much Portal based. It was very based on Portal 1 and 2 in terms of its puzzle design. And that's okay. I didn't really have much more to put down for it. I enjoyed it well enough, but I think it definitely had some room where it could have been better. Voice of Cards, The Forsaken Maiden. And this one is where 100% bias is going to be out there, but Voice of Cards, I've played a Voice of Cards game every year because I got the trilogy, and I feel like I shouldn't have done it one a year but I wanted to space it out a little. Also because my heart hurt after The Forsaken Maiden. My God. Oh man. Yeah, The Forsaken Maiden is really well done RPG play. It's very much a tabletop game, like literally, because you have cards making up a map on a table, and it's very physically present in the virtual space. It's a second person narrative where it's telling you that you do this, you do that, and you see Laddie, oh my God, Laddie's such a precious character. It was produced by Yoko Taro, the one who did Nier Automata. The whole trilogy of Voice of Cards has been a personal, close to my heart RPG series, and I cannot recommend enough that more people try it. I loved it. I really appreciate it. Absolutely stellar. The ending is super sad though, so be ready. Let's see. Next. Okay, you're going right next to, I think it goes a little bit below. I liked both games. Again, the remastered versions. Both very good. Kinda silly. I liked the Zelda cutscenes. I liked the Zelda cutscenes a little bit more than Link's, because Link's is just kind of him going, golly! And that's kind of it. I like Zelda's good. Actually, I guess speaking of fun voice acting, that was also something that Silent Hill 2 did that. Sometimes bad voice acting is the best thing you could have. And I think these two games are great examples of, if you had good voice acting there, it would not be fun. That's not to say Silent Hill 2's voice acting is bad, but there's a particular voice line I'm thinking of that I just adore. And another, wow, S tier is actually stacked this year. Holy crap. I think this one gets to go to I think it goes to the bottom of S tier. No, top of A tier. I don't know if I could recommend Space Marines to everybody. It's a similar thing like Silent Hill where content is key here. And if it wasn't for the fact that this game is caked in blood, and it's like Helldivers where it's just excellent gameplay and the co-op mechanic and the single player mechanic working very well. The fact that Space Marines can be played by yourself and with other people makes it a little bit superior to Helldivers in that regard. But the vibes of Space Marines 2, off the charts. Excellent. Had a ton of fun playing it. 5 games left. I actually think that WarioWare Mega Micro Games, I had a lot of fun with it. The other side content was just a lot of fun. Very silly game. A lot of great fun. Easily replayable. I think the skill ceiling of mastering micro games is surprisingly high. So it's got a lot to work on in terms of what the player can do. Really good game. Wizard 101, I think I could put this to, I'm going to put it near Buckshot Roulette. I'm not really big on MMOs, but as an MMO, it's really good. I remember seeing all the ads for Wizard 101 and not knowing what it was or how it worked. Honestly, gameplay was really good. The only reason I can't recommend it higher is because after a certain point, it is paid entry to get to certain areas. That can be a little bit of a turnoff for some players. I think for those who find the gameplay really investing and worthy of your time, I think it's an excellent piece of history to look at though. So really cool stuff. Excellent game, even if it aged a bit strangely in places. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I think it gets to go right next to Pocket. I really love Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! is one of my favorite trading card games. I think 2024 was a strange year for it because there are a lot of meta warping decks and cards added. And while Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the benefit of having 11,000 cards to work off of that are, and all of them are available in Master Duel, it does have the issue that if you're playing online or playing with on a higher level, you're going to start getting funneled into meta or anti-meta strategies. And thankfully, there's a lot of different options for it. So no games are going to look 100% the same unless you're playing against the same Sword Soul decks every time. And Master Duel, I think, is the best place to play Yu-Gi-Oh! If you're playing virtually. And I can't really let my bias for my favorite card game get in the way. Zelda 2. I only played this a little bit on the NES Sunday, but I have my time playing it as a kid. I think it's gonna go right here. I do love it a lot. I think it's highly underrated. It's a really fun game to me. Still has some issues, a little bit more towards the experienced RPG players and an action-adventure game players, and certainly a lot more obtuse with age. Definitely not the worst NES game that's ever come out, though. And Zelda 2 has a lot of fun polish and interesting ideas that are fun to work from, but it does suffer from its age. Celeste. Let's put Celeste up with Hollow Knight. I think Celeste can go there. Celeste is an odd duck for me because I didn't really find myself too enamored with the story. I thought it was sweet and it was pretty nice. It was a story about the main character coming to terms with anxiety, which is a very, very close to my heart topic, but I thought it was just okay. I thought it was very broad brushstrokes to me. Gameplay was stellar. Much like Hollow Knight, the gameplay is stellar. The music is on point. There's a lot of fun ideas being thrown around. I think Celeste it kind of stumbles with the weight of its expectations, a little bit like Hollow Knight. The expectations I had for the game were great and heavy. And I think Celeste suffered from that a little less, but still didn't quite match where I was projecting. Let's see. Let's look over this tier list again. Think about it a little bit. I think a lot of the best games this year, like again, I think only C and D tier are what I would say are less than stellar games. Like B tier games are still, to me, excellent games. Basically everything up from here up is like, we're looking at a scale of 1 to 10 where 5 is average. B and higher, it is still 7 to 8 out of 10. It's just that A's and S's, like S's are like, to me, 9 to 10. And I think A is 8 to 9. And then B is 8 to 7. And like every game here showcases the potential of a fun time. There is still a lot of fun to be had in all of these games. There are stories to explore. There are good things in all of these, but I have to organize them in ways that are based around what I understood about them when I played them and how much I got to see that potential. And also in some cases, it's because some of them are harder to recommend than others. I think games like Fear and Hunger and Baldur's Gate 3 and Trading Card Game Pocket are specifically niche games that require a bit of gaming know-how to jump into. I mean, heck, Grim Fandango's just crazy. I think this list is good. I'm happy with this. And I'm also happy that I got to play so many different games this year with you guys and got to see so many new experiences and stories. And I think I've grown as a game dev for it. And also as a player. I've definitely expanded my horizons on a lot of different games. If you did watch this far and didn't just skim through to see my hot takes and figure things out, I'd say add the word library to your comment if you actually watched beginning to end. If not, then you can just do so and trick me. I don't care. This is being recorded before Christmas, and I'm hoping that I can, if you like this stuff, you should probably check me out on Twitch because I stream games like this on my Twitch, so you can check that out. And you can subscribe here to see the VODs after a stream if you don't make the streams, because that's sometimes just happens. I stream there Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. And you can also check out all of the work I've done. I have a bunch of books out and music is out, and Red Genie is still available on Steam. Those will all be in the description. And yeah, we did good this year. I'm happy that we got to play all these. And now whenever I see you next, goodbye for now and thank you so much. I'll see you soon.